St. Marcellus I was Roman. Under Maxentius, he was banished from Rome in 309 on account of the tumult caused by the severity of the penances he had imposed on Christians who had lapsed under the recent persecution. He died the same year, being succeeded by Eusebius. His relics are under the altar of San Marcello al Corso in Rome. Since 1969, his feast day, traditionally kept on the 16th of January, is left to local calendars and is no longer inscribed in the general Roman calendar. St. Eusebius was Greek. Difficulty arose, as in the case of his predecessor Marcellus I, out of Eusebius's attitude toward the lapsi. Eusebius maintained the attitude of the Roman Church, adopted after the Decian persecutions, that the apostate should not be forever debarred from ecclesiastical communion, but readmitted after doing proper penance. This view was opposed by a faction of Christians in Rome under the leadership of Heraclius. Johann Peter Kirsch believes it likely that Heraclius was the chief of a party made up of apostates and their followers, who demanded immediate restoration to the Roman Church. Emperor Maxentius intervened and exiled them both. Eusebius died in exile in Sicily very soon after being banished and was buried in the catacomb of Calixtus. Pope Damasus I placed an epitaph of 8 hexameters over his tomb because of his firm defense of ecclesiastical discipline and the banishment which he suffered thereby. His feast is celebrated on the 17th of August. The feast had previously been observed on the 26th of September. Saint Miltiades was Greco-Aramaean or Syrian. It was during his pontificate that Emperor Constantine the Great issued the Edict of Milan in 313, giving Christianity legal status within the Roman Empire. The Pope also received the palace of Empress Fausta, where the Lateran Palace, the papal seat and residence of the papal administration, would be built. At the Lateran Council, during the schism with the Church of Carthage, Miltiades condemned the rebaptism of apostatized bishops and priests, a teaching of Donatus Magnus. Miltiades and his successor, Sylvester I, were part of the clergy of Pope Marcellinus. It has been suggested that he was party to the alleged apostasy of Pope Marcellinus, which was repudiated by Augustine of Hippo. This view originated from letters, dated to between 400 and 410, written by Donatist Bishop Petilianus of Constantine, who claimed that Marcellinus, along with Miltiades and Sylvester, surrendered sacred texts and offered incense to Roman deities. Saint Sylvester I was Roman. He filled the See of Rome at an important era in the history of the Western Church, yet very little is known of him. The accounts of his pontificate preserved in the 7th or 8th century Liber Pontificalis contain little more than a record of the gifts said to have been conferred on the Church by Constantine I, although it does say that he was the son of a Roman named Rufinus. His feast is celebrated as St. Sylvester's Day on the 31st of December in Western Christianity and on the 2nd of January in Eastern Christianity. Large churches were founded and built during Sylvester I's pontificate, including Basilica of St. John Lateran, Basilica of the Holy Cross in Jerusalem, Old St. Peter's Basilica, and several churches built over the graves of martyrs. Sylvester did not attend the First Council of Nicaea in 325, where the Nicene Creed was formulated, but he was represented by 2 legates, Vitus and Vincentius, and he approved the council's decision. In the West, the liturgical feast of St. Sylvester is on the 31st of December, the day of his burial in the catacomb of Priscilla. This is now the last day in the year, and accordingly in German-speaking countries and in some others close to them, New Year's Eve is known as Sylvester. In some other countries, too, the day is usually referred to as St. Sylvester's Day or the Feast of St. Sylvester. St. Mark was Roman. Little is known of Mark's early life. According to the Liber Pontificalis, he was a Roman, and his father's name was Priscus. Mark succeeded Sylvester I as Pope on 18th of January, 336. Some evidence suggests that the early lists of bishops and martyrs, known as the Depositio Episcoporum and Depositio Martyrum, were begun during his pontificate. According to the Liber Pontificalis, Pope Mark issued a constitution investing the Bishop of Ostia with a pallium and confirming his power to consecrate newly elected popes. Likewise, according to the Liber Pontificalis, Pope Mark is credited with the foundation of the Basilica of San Marco, a basilica in Rome, and a cemetery church over the Catacomb of Balbina just outside the city on lands obtained as a donation from Emperor Constantine. Mark died of natural causes on the 7th of October and was buried in the Catacomb of Balbina. In 1048, his remains were removed to the town of Velletri, and from 1145 were relocated to the Basilica of San Marco in Rome, where they are kept in an urn under the altar. His feast day is celebrated on the 7th of October. He is particularly venerated at the Abbadia San Salvatore at Monte Amiata. St. Julius I was Roman. He is notable for asserting the authority of the Pope over the Arian Eastern bishops, as well as a dubious claim that he set on the 25th of December as the official birth date of Jesus. Julius was a native of Rome and was chosen as successor of Pope Mark after the Roman seat had been vacant for 4 months. Julius is chiefly known by the part he took in the Arian controversy. It was through the influence of Julius that at a later date, the Council of Sardica in Illyria was held, which was attended by only 76 Eastern bishops, who speedily withdrew to Philippopolis and deposed Julius at the Council of Philippopolis, along with Athanasius and others. The 300 Western bishops who remained confirmed the previous decisions of the Roman Synod and issued a number of decrees regarding church discipline. In 350 AD, Julius I declared on December 25th as the official date of the birth of Jesus. Liberius was a Roman. According to the Catalogus Liberianus, he was consecrated on the 22nd of May as the successor to Pope Julius I. He's not mentioned as a saint in the Roman martyrology. That makes him the earliest pontiff not to be venerated as a saint in the Roman Rite, and one of only 2 popes to be omitted from Roman Catholic sainthood in the first 500 years of church history. Liberius is mentioned in the Greek Monology, the Eastern equivalent to the martyrologies of the Western Church and a measure of sainthood prior to the institution of the formal Western processes of canonization. Due to his refusal to pledge himself to the Arians, led by Emperor Constantius II, he would first be imprisoned and later released by the same emperor who had intended Liberius to be co-pope with the anti-pope Felix II, though the people of the city would expel Felix soon after. Pope Pius IX noted in Quartus Supra that Liberius was falsely accused by the Arians, and he had refused to condemn Athanasius of Alexandria. In his encyclical Principi Apostolorum Petro, Pope Benedict XV noted that Pope Liberius went fearlessly into exile in defense of the Orthodox faith. The Basilica di Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome is sometimes referred to as the Liberian Basilica. Saint Damasus I was Roman. He presided over the Council of Rome of 382 that determined the canon, or official list of sacred scripture. He spoke out against major heresies, including Apollinarianism and Macedonianism, and thus solidifying the faith of the Catholic Church, and encouraged production of the Vulgate Bible with his support for Jerome. He helped reconcile the relations between the Church of Rome and the Church of Antioch, and encouraged the veneration of martyrs. As well as various prose letters and other pieces, Damasus was the author of Latin verse. A number of images of Damas in gold glass cups probably represent him and seem to be the first contemporary images of a pope to survive. His life coincided with the rise of Emperor Constantine I and the reunion and redivision of the Western and Eastern Roman empires, which is associated with the legitimization of Christianity and its later adoption as the official religion of the Roman state in 380. The reign of Gratian, which coincided with Damasus's papacy, forms an important epoch in ecclesiastical history, since during that period, 359 to 383, Catholic Christianity for the first time became dominant throughout the empire. Under the influence of Ambrose, Gratian refused to wear the insignia of the Pontifex Maximus as unbefitting a Christian, removed the altar of victory from the Senate at Rome, despite protests from the pagan members of the Senate. St. Siricius was a Roman. In response to inquiries from Bishop Hymerius of Tarragona, Siricius issued the Directa Decretal, containing decrees of baptism, church discipline, and other matters. His are the oldest completely preserved papal decretals. He is said to have been the first bishop of Rome to call himself pope. After the death of Damasus I, Siricius was elected pope unanimously, despite attempts by Ursinus to promote himself. Emperor Valentinian II's confirmation of his election stilled any further objections. Siricius was an active pope involved in the administration of the church and the handling of various factions and viewpoints within it. In response to a letter from Bishop Hymerius of Tarragona, he issued decisions on 15 different points on matters regarding baptism, penance, church discipline, and the celibacy of the clergy. His are the oldest completely preserved decretals. Siricius is sometimes said to be the first bishop of Rome to style himself pope. In the East, it was used only for the Patriarch of Alexandria. Marcellinus is the first bishop of Rome shown in sources to have had the title pope used of him. From the 6th century, the imperial chancery of Constantinople normally reserved this designation for the Bishop of Rome. From the early 6th century, it began to be confined in the West to the Bishop of Rome, a practice that was firmly in place by the 11th century. Saint Anastasius was a Roman, and he was born in Rome and was the son of Maximus. He succeeded Siricius as pope and condemned the writings of the Alexandrian theologian Origen shortly after their translation into Latin. He fought against these writings throughout his papacy, and in 400 he called a council to discuss them. The council agreed that Origen was not faithful to the church. During his reign, he also encouraged Christians in North Africa to fight Donatism. He instructed priests to stand and bow their head as they read from the Gospels. Among his friends were Augustine, Jerome, and Paulinus. Jerome speaks of him as a man of great holiness who was rich in his poverty. He died in Rome and was eventually buried in the catacomb of Pontian together with his son and immediate successor, Innocent I, which is probably a unique case of a pope being succeeded by his son.